Welcome in, everybody, to a nightcap edition of Birds 365, a Wednesday evening, August 7th edition of the show, day number 10, practice number 10, I should say, is officially in the books. Eagles now are done their 4-day run, which was their Johnny Mack dubbed it the dog days of summer, so it's officially in the rearview mirror, now preparing for their first preseason game on Friday night. Johnny Mack, how you doing on this Wednesday night, my man?
Doing well. Yeah, 4 days. The grind, the dog days of summer officially over. I don't think you're going to see, we don't have the new schedule yet after this game, but I don't think you're going to see 4 consecutive practices again the rest of the summer. So, yeah, busy stretch, at least for the modern era of the NFL.
How did it hold up today weather-wise? A hot one, cool one? I think it was pretty cool with the overcast, right?
Yeah, it was compared to yesterday, it was, but it's still very humid, obviously, with all the rain in the area. So saturated from that, the humidity was still pretty oppressive. But yeah, it's nice when it's not. It might be oppressive from a humidity standpoint, but at least it wasn't 90 plus degrees on top of it. So a little bit of a break.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mack. Let's get right to. We're going to get into practice. We're going to get into day number 10. We are going to break down everything that happened at training camp. We're going to talk about the press conferences. Jalen had a good press conference today. We're going to talk about the ESPN article that came out today from Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler. That's obviously created a lot of headlines today in the city of Philadelphia. We will start with that before we get into practice. Let's go here. Andrew Hernandez says, I didn't write it. Johnny Mack, everybody heard.
Yeah, evidently, a lot of people took that out of context. So, yeah, for people that don't know, Tim McManus wrote it. He and I are good friends, and yeah, what happened was, I was in the front row, and Jalen was kind of asking me questions about why is this coming up now.
Yeah,
and I told him there's an ESPN report, and he basically said, well, why write it now? And I said, I didn't write it. And it's not my position to say why Tim wrote it now, why he did it. That's not my business. So ultimately, Tim was in the back row because people were talking to other people in what's called the mix zone, and walked up and he said, I wrote it. And then it was fine, but everybody kind of took it out of context. So it went seamlessly. And then he talked about it and he explained it. But yeah, I felt bad because some people take it out of context.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was fun. I mean, I didn't think anything bad, negative of it. I just thought it was funny to hear, Johnny or Jalen Hurts call on you and look at you, and you're like, "Hey, man, it wasn't me. I don't know what you're looking at."
Well, that's why a lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm throwing Tim." I mean, first of all, Tim's going to stand up. He's going to stand by his work, so it's not affecting
yeah, that's what I
him.
mean. It's not a knock on you to say you didn't write it. You didn't write it, so why would you get?
It's not my responsibility to say why did he write it now. That's Tim's, and he did. So I don't know why people are making a big deal out of it. I didn't write it. So I said I didn't write it. So I can't answer that question. Jalen was asking me a question. So anyway, that was the extent of it.
Well, good stuff. What did you think of? Let's get into the article and the context. And I thought there were some interesting things in there. Before we get into that, John, what do you have to say about the timing? I mean, you're a reporter, so maybe you can give more context than I can on this. But I thought the timing was a little odd. Wait, before I did, I got to thank James. James drops 100 memberships gifted. Look at this. James Carver, my man. Thank you, brother. We appreciate that so much. We had a bunch of members join today. Sorry to get in the middle of the show, but that is very nice of you to do that. Now 100 new people to support the channel. Thank you, James Carver, for doing that. That is great stuff. And thanks to all of our members who joined today. We appreciate each and every one of you. Carver, thank you very much, man. Back to it, though, Johnny Mack. What did you think of the article, the timing of it, when it came out, what it had to say? I kind of get the people who are like, look, we're 8 months out. Jalen Hurts even said it. He's like, we're 8 months after this thing. Why now? What did you think of that?
Well, as far as the mechanics of, I mean, it was a very well sourced piece, and people don't just pick up the phone and give you stuff. So you can't just time when you have everything buttoned up, and you're going to publish an article. If we're about timing, you always know. For instance, we have this embargo session with Nick Sirianni every year that's embargoed to a certain date, and on that date before training camp, you'll see a bunch of Nick Sirianni stories. That's what the timing is. In this particular instance, Jeremy Fowler and Tim wrote the piece. Um, you know, maybe they have Wink Martindale on the record. Maybe Wink just
Right.
answered it. There's a lot of other things they had to flesh out, and obviously it took a lot of time. And for those people saying, "Look, Tim's trying to figure out what happened last year, like we're all trying to figure out last year," and we talk about this on the show all the time. What happened? Nobody really knows because it was such a historic collapse. So for those people who are saying, "Oh, forget about it, forget it," that's not our job. It's your job to be a fan of the team. If you don't want to think about it, don't think about it. But that's not our job. Our job is not to protect the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not to sweep things under the rug. To me, uh, the most interesting part of the piece was the Wink Martindale stuff, which I
Yeah,
think is good and
I thought it
bad.
was cool.
Yeah, I think it's good and bad. I think it's good that it speaks to Jalen's work ethic that he reaches out to
Yeah.
people like that
Yep.
when there's
Agreed.
an instance, and he's trying to get better. He's trying to work hard. Uh, I also think the Eagles coaches reached out to him as well. Um, and I also think, well, why do you need to reach out to Wink Martindale? Figure it out. So I thought there was some good and bad to that
You think
aspect.
that's a knock on Jalen, or more like the coaches? Like, mate, does he not have the coaches in the room who can teach him? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. You know how I feel about. Boy, I got to tell you about this with Nick Sirianni. Again, the whole mentality of you go win 29 of 32 games, or whatever it is. I forget the exact number, but that's close. Um, and you do it by luck, or you do it by talent, or you do it, well, where was the talent when they won 1-6 or 1-7, whatever the hell it was at the end of the season? Same guys. I don't. The mentality to protect the players at all costs, and it's always the coach's fault when things go wrong, and when things go right, and you have the best stretch of Eagles history, and again, they're 91 years old. They got nothing to do with it. It's all the players. So that part bothers me. And by the way, I'm a the talent is responsible more than the coaching. I say that all the time. But that's good and bad. It's not just good, it's also bad. So when you talk about some of the stuff where going off the reservation in Seattle, which everybody now knows, and still to this day, is a big part of the piece was about Nick Sirianni taking accountability. He was talking about accountability in the press conference today. Um, to this day, he's not taking accountability for that. AJ has, he has not. Um, and he's the quarterback. He's the guy who threw the football. So that's part. Um, and I thought and I just read about this on Sports Illustrated. I think there was a lot of sizzle in that piece, and I think everybody understandably is focused on the sizzle. And I think that the steak was the last quote of Jalen's press conference today, And he said it before. This is the second time he said it. But for whatever reason, I don't know, people gloss over it. Talking about, and this was the disconnect between Jalen Hurts, Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni. The autonomy at the line of scrimmage that we've been talking about a lot this offseason, ever since Tom Brady talked about what good quarterback play is. On that viral video, we've talked about it a lot. This is what Jalen said. It's been a role I've been waiting on. I know I've had a well-respected guy, a Hall of Fame guy that's been doing it, Jason Kelce. Now we are forced to have an opportunity to do that, something I've been wanting. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. It's weird. And I don't even think Jason was mentioned in the article. If he was, I don't have it in front of me, but I don't think he was. And I'm not saying Jason Kelce is responsible, because he's not responsible. He's just doing he's doing his job at such an incredibly high level that it's counterintuitive. You don't want to shift to a better sort of overall philosophy because he's so good at his job. And
yeah, I have a couple questions on this, but yeah, go ahead.
As long as he was going to continue to play, Jalen was not going to have the autonomy he wanted. And he has a great relationship with Jason Kelce. Jason Kelce has a great relationship with Jalen Hurts. But that is a silver lining to one of the greatest centers of all time walking away, because now the quarterback has everything he wants. Now he has everything he wants. And Kellen Moore said he's got the trump card. And now it's his responsibility. And he said today, and I'll say it again, he said how it's supposed to be.
Okay, so there's a lot to take from that. Is that
it's not a knock at Jason Kelce.
Well, because that's where I was going. It's either that or it's, let me ask this out front. When Carson Wentz was the quarterback in Philadelphia with Jason Kelce, did Jason Kelce pick up the blitzes for Carson Wentz?
Yes.
Okay, so is it an organizational thing, or is it a Jason Kelce thing where they had a Hall of Fame center and they trusted him so much that it didn't matter who was quarterback, they were going to keep that in his hands?
Yes, the latter. Doesn't matter who the quarterback.
So I don't think that's a bad thing then. I don't think that's a knock on Jason, and maybe Jalen.
Not a knock. It has nothing to do with Jason Kelce. Nothing.
Okay, so
there's a counterintuitive notion that, he's so good at his job description. You're taking away something from somebody else in a very delicate ecosystem that is the NFL. And in this particular instance, you're taking away from a quarterback who craved it and wanted it and was unhappy he didn't have it. And he wasn't upset at Jason Kelce. He knew it. He said it. As long as he's here, it's not going to happen. And that's exactly how it played out. Now that he's gone, he will have that opportunity. And now it's all on him. He's got everything he wanted.
Yeah.
And now it's up to Jalen Hurts.
I'll tell you what, a big takeaway here is Jalen Hurts has more power right now than he's ever had, obviously, here in Philly. You could argue he's got more power than Nick Sirianni right now.
Well, you pay a quarterback $250 million. You're always going to lean towards the quarterback, but that's not unique.
I just think he mentions Lurie a lot. Do you take anything from that? Do you well, wait, before we get into that, do you think was Jalen saying that and he was okay with Kelce doing it because he's acclimated to the NFL as a quarterback? It's his first couple of years. You're learning new offenses, all sorts of things. Maybe he was all right at the time with Jason Kelce calling out the protections, but he also understood eventually I'm going to have to do that as a quarterback. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he knew eventually he's going to have to do it when Jason retired. He knew he wasn't going to do it before Jason retired. Doesn't mean he didn't crave it, because he's obviously very competitive, and he wants to, do things in a certain way. And I think part of it wasn't when Brian Johnson got the job, he thought there would be at least more autonomy than there was before, but that turned out not to be the case. And I think that was the disconnect. And from Nick's standpoint, it was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is probably a good way to go about things. But then when it did break, they weren't able to fix it. But I mean, when they were winning, when they were on that stretch, I mean, I think it's insanity. I think it's revisionist history for people to come and say, oh, this was a bad offense. I mean, what does that say about every other coach in this league? There's certain things. There was one quote. There was one phrase, or I don't know if it were a direct quote. I'll try to find it, about Nick's X's and O chops, and for being for being around the NFL as long as I have, I see things like that, and I say to myself, that's somebody who's jealous of that success. I mean, if he's got no X's and O chops, like people like to say, what does that say about you as a coach who can't beat him? What does that say about you? Now you can go the fan route and say, well, it's just because of the talent. And they had significant talent. Don't get me wrong. You can never win at that level in this league without significant talent. But they had significant talent at the end of last season. Why didn't they trump it? Why did it all of a sudden stop? If the head coach has no play calling skills or no ability to build an offense and all this, and he won 29 of 32 games in this league, which is built on parity, what does that say about all the other coaches?
It's very true. What do you think of the, you said you brought up the word revisionist history, and the one thing I was just debating with this on the National Football Show with Dan Silio. He's like, he hired Brian Johnson and didn't let him do his job. And I'm like, would you? I mean, look, I get it. You want Brian Johnson to be a guy, but you're not just going to give up your offense that just went to the Super Bowl for a guy that's never called a play in the NFL. What's your take on the relationship with Brian Johnson? Many are saying he was scapegoated, after this article, and a lot of people have believed that. Maybe Jalen believes that.
Scapegoated for the entire, since the day he got fired.
Yeah, but do you think he was scapegoated,
yes, of course he was. That's the nature of the NFL. When you do, and that's every city. That's not just Philadelphia.
Well, then what do you think about the relationship of not let the where Nick is over, has his claws on everything, and he won't let Brian call what he wants to call, and all of those things? What do you think about that then?
Well, he's the head coach. So, in the way things were set up, he did the same thing with Shane Steichen. I mean, people believe what they want to believe. Nick, was in charge of the game plan. Essentially, you're ordering off Nick's menu. So he had the ability to order off Nick's menu and call plays off Nick's menu.
Right.
Same as Shane. And that's what Nick said would happen as long as he was here, and shifted gears because he had to. It was the same setup under Shane Steichen. Now, did he trust Shane a little bit more because he had a prior relationship? He had a longer relationship? Yes. But the assumption that, but from your description of let him do his job, that was his job coming in. He was going to be the play caller because Nick wanted to be CEO coach. And he knew that he was going to be calling plays off Nick's menu. That's what he was hired to do.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't think I can't really knock Nick for that, John. I can't.
No, no. Again, he was having. There's the revisionist history. He just made the Super Bowl.
I know, right? You're not just going to give up your offense to a guy that's never been a coordinator in the league.
It's that part of it is absurdly revisionist. Like, why? Why would you come off that historic season and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to take a step back and let Brian Johnson." You didn't even let Shane Steichen do that. So, yeah, that part of it's kind of goofy for the people that say that, and that wasn't in the article we're talking about. But so here from a team source, described a lack of full respect for Sirianni's X's and O's chops. So essentially, it was more about you know, if you want to say Jalen's perspective and that disconnect. But, if you, and then there was another team source who said basically that Jalen didn't give Nick enough credit. So, that might be the loggerheads of that relationship. And, that tends to happen when you have success. And everybody's got an ego in this league, and everybody's, if you go back to Howie and Jeffrey with Doug Peterson, they thought they were a large part, and they were a large part of winning the Super Bowl, but maybe they thought they were too large a part and unwilling to give, somebody else some credit. And that happens a lot in this league, including Philadelphia. But I don't know. Guys got the best winning percentage in Eagles history. 3 for 3 in the playoffs. Made the Super Bowl. He's not an idiot. A lot of people think he is.
No doubt about it. I want to welcome everybody in tonight. Just 25 minutes into the show here. We'll be live with you till 8 p.m. Still going to recap day 10 of training camp practice. Talking now about that ESPN article from Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler that came out today. You heard Jalen talk about it in the press conference. You saw Johnny Mack say, I didn't write it. There's some good stuff there. Getting Johnny Mack's take on that now. Interested to hear, what more John makes of it, just because I'm not a reporter, so I view it in a different lens as John. So, I've given my take on it today. I'm looking to get more of John's. I want to welcome everybody in. A lot of good people in here. Appreciate all of you guys. Make sure you guys smash that like button. And if you're in here, already 56 likes on the show tonight. You guys are killing it. James Carver dished out 100 memberships. So, James, thank you for doing that. Super chat, Jason A-Team says we need a Stop It J-Mac t-shirt, Big Z. I love that. Maybe we'll get a Stop It t-shirt for J-Mac. So thank you all. And then thank you to all.
I got to get a I didn't write it t-shirt, evidently.
Yeah, we might have to make that too, Johnny Mac. I'm going to thank all of our members who joined today. Wayne Miller, Spin Bad, SMD Eagles, James Jones, Senor, Big Marshall, Q Ball, Dullahan, Sean Mims, Matt the Angler, WCB JJ, Crawley's in here, Eduardo Reza, and Prince Swayze. So a lot of good things happening on the channel today. You guys have been great all day long. Can't thank you enough for supporting the channel. It goes a long way. So we thank you for that very much. John, you said there was a lot of sizzle. You talked about the steak already. What was the sizzle to you? I'm curious to hear just some of the small things that you took.
The sizzle's the disconnect stuff. They don't hate each other. I mean, and at the end, for the people that read the entire thing, because it's a lengthy piece, it's very fair, and you point out the two riding together in Dom's golf cart before this came out, high-fiving on the sidelines. They're not punching each other in the face. So the fact that people butt heads when you're losing in the NFL is not exactly uncommon. But that's the kind of sizzle that people are going to focus on. And that's what I'm talking about there. So, to me, as I said, the Wink Martindale stuff was very interesting, and from a good and bad perspective. The good being that not only Jalen, but again, the coaches reached out to Wink as well, trying to take advantage of a weird situation when he moved on so quickly from the Giants, and they have tremendous respect for him. And he did a good job with the blitz and confusing the Eagles offense and trying to pick his mind and say, what went on in this type of instance. And, Wink saying he's been coaching for 40 years and nobody's ever done that before.
Yeah.
That tells you kind of the I think all that is tremendous. But on the other hand, I say to myself, that's the job of the coaches. And, you guys should have prepared. For all the people that criticize, there's plenty of reasons to criticize the Eagles coaching staff last year. There's plenty. And I always say the people that wanted Nick fired shouldn't even talked about the offense. They should have talked about demoting Sean Desai, which was the disastrous decision. There's plenty of stuff. And the biggest part is, look, your job as a coaching staff, the head coach, particularly the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, when you talk about that blitz, Jalen was not effective against the blitz late last season, to put it mildly.
You think there was any level of a lack of trust between him and Jason Kelce with those blitzes? Or was it just that he wasn't developed enough in his reading of defenses to be able to pick up on them? Like why did he struggle?
He wasn't prepared to handle it. And that's the coach's job. That's the teaching, the execution. The hot routes that everybody talks about, they're in the offense, but you got to use them. How many times have I said on the show, you don't call the hot routes? There's no such thing as calling a hot route.
You have said that quite a bit, Johnny Mac.
That is something done on the field in real time, because the quarterback sees a blitz and says, all right, we're going to go to this route. And, if you want to criticize the coaching staff, you say they didn't have them prepared well enough to handle that kind of stuff. But so, and that's a legitimate criticism of the coaching staff. And, when you have the expectations of the Eagles, and for everybody wants to tie this up in a little bow, and everybody does, because they want the one reason the Eagles collapse. You can't. There's a million. And I try to bring as much context to this show as anywhere that covers this team. And I try to do it on a daily basis. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. But there's a million different reasons. But if you do want that little bow, I would say they just collapse under the expectations. That is, you've heard it numerous times, and you've heard it again in this article. You've heard it on the show. You've heard it way back when they were 10-1, the most miserable 10-1 team ever. When they were 10-1, I think the quote in the story was, it was like somebody killed their dog. They were miserable, winning every week, because they weren't winning with style points, and they weren't winning. And I remember asking Nick about that. Are you guys having fun? And he said, oh yeah, we're having fun. No, they weren't. They were just miserable because of the expectations. And then San Francisco and Dallas punched them in the mouth back to back. And that was it.
Blew the motor out. They never never able to fix it. Yeah. Anyway, I want to move on from last year. I just wanted to get your take on that article. A lot of people are talking about. I know people are like, "Oh, stop talking about last year." Look, you got to talk about it. All right. I mean, it comes out. Everybody's talking about it. we are going to talk about it here on Birds 365. If everybody's talking about it, that means you definitely got to talk about it. We talk about things that others do not talk about, but we will also talk about that stuff. We want to make you guys informed on everything that's going on. John, before we get to our first commercial break, and we'll come back and break down day number 10, practice number 10, I should say, of practice, which was today before their preseason game on Friday. Any other takeaways that are worth noting from the article other than it's time to shut the book on 23 and gear up for 24 for a Super Bowl run?
Shut the book on 2023 because fans want us to shut the book on 2023. If somebody else, uncovers something that's going to be reported, and that's just the way it is.
I get it, but
it's not our job.
Shady, I think, the timing of it. I get it. I mean, he's got not every source comes to at the same time and everything, but
there's no timing, shady timing on August 7th.
That's just my opinion. I just think it's all odd that 10 days into camp, everything's going good. And then you have a Bombshell article talking about the same crap we've been talking about since January.
No, that is absolute bullshit.
All right,
Number one, I've known Tim for 20 freaking years.
Yeah, he's a great reporter. I know he is.
That ain't the way he does his job. It ain't about setting a bomb on a team having a good training camp. We're the ones telling you they're having a good training camp. And Tim's been firmly in that group as well. We're telling you that because the offense, mainly, not the defense, the offense is having a good training camp. Not because we're trying to prop up the team or trying to take down the team. If you're timing something, and people do this, and you'll see it in politics all the time, you do it in start of training camp, start of the regular season. You don't do it on August 7th, on the 4th day of 4 consecutive practices, when everybody's dragging their ass around. It had nothing to do with putting a bombshell on a team that was having a good training camp. That, I'm sorry, as somebody who's done this for 25 years, there's a lot of misunderstanding of what our jobs are. That is absolute. I can say that 150%. That is absolute bullshit. Well, nobody who covers this team cares. The real people who cover this team, not the cheerleaders, the real people who cover this team do not care about positive or negative. They don't. I don't care what people think. And I'm talking about McManus, and I'm talking about McLean, and I'm talking about Berman, and there's a bunch of other people I'll forget. But those guys, they don't care. They don't care about propping this team up. And they don't care about ripping them down. They care about telling you the stories of this particular team. And Tim is in that.
Look, I get the job of the reporter. I never criticized that. I just said it is, weird. It comes out now. I get it, though. I understand all the sides of it. I said that on the show earlier today. They have a different job than I do, than fans do, than everybody else does. I understand. I'm just saying.
But I think a lot of people think that way. Like Tim woke up today and said, you know what? The Eagles are doing too well. I'm going to drop a bomb on them. Bullshit. I mean, that's insanity.
Yeah, I mean, John, I've been talking to you about the Eagles for 4 years. I understand the role of the reporter and the objective.
You just said they dropped it. That's
I didn't say that. I said it looks odd that it comes out right now. I never said that he did that. I'm saying it looks odd to the people. Who do reporters, John, write articles for? I'm just saying, to the people that consume it, the perception is there. I'm not saying Tim did that.
Yeah, but the perception is there because people that don't understand the job push that perception. The perception that we should somehow protect this team, or we should somehow
we should protect the team at all.
Positive.
I don't think
and only talk about things like that. That's why that kind of stuff exists. And that's why it's a pet peeve of mine, because instead of doing that, and I'm looking at WIP and 97.5, instead of doing that, and criticizing people like Tim or anybody else because they put out an article that certain people think is negative. And by the way, it's not even negative. It's just a bunch of source material. Yeah, I don't get it, and it bothers me. And I know I'm fighting a losing battle because people.
I get what you're saying. I understand why you stand up for your position. I completely do. I'm just telling you how I think the people who make and I don't think it's because I'm sitting here saying this. I think it's just the blanket assumption of people who read it and are like, oh, of course, the media again. I'm not saying Tim is wrong.
That's all I'm saying. I'm saying the people that think that way are fucking clueless. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That's
they
fine.
are absolutely 1,000% clueless that think that we're sitting there. Again, I always make the jokes that we're sitting there having our meetings, having our weekly meeting. Oh, things are going too well. Things are going too well for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to take them down a notch or two. We don't care.
I get it.
Loss, draw. Give me a good story. I don't care if they win. I don't care if they lose. I hope people are healthy, and there's people I like who work for that organization, and I root for them from a personal level, and I hope they're successful. But as far as the team, I don't care. And if that offends people, and I know it offends people greatly, I don't care if they win. I don't care. I had a bunch of people today because I was making fun of the Simmons stuff, saying, "Oh, you don't want Justin Simmons in Philadelphia." I don't even know Justin Simmons. I don't care who they bring in, who they don't bring in. What I can't say, it doesn't make any sense. So it's a waste of time to talk about. That's what I don't like. It's got nothing to do with Justin Simmons as a player.
I get it. I understand your point of view. I'm just saying perception is what it is. You can argue why it's created or not, but perception becomes reality. And we're talking about a football team that cares about the perception of their team. No doubt about it. Their PR department cares a lot about the perception. And
that's their job to care about the perception.
Just like it's your job to be an objective reporter, and it's our job to consume the content of the team or the fans. That's what they do. I'm just telling you that that's the perception. I'm not arguing that you're wrong. I'm just telling you that is how people are going to view it.
And I'm trying to educate that perception is a bunch of bullshit. That's all I'm trying to do.
Good. I'm happy that you gave that education. I would agree with you. I don't see it. I mean, I think that we could have talked about this all summer, but it comes out now, whatever, when the resources come. I get it. I get what you're saying. I understand that there's a different role. But anyway, let's move on. Any closing thoughts that you want to get out on the article and everything that came out today?
Well, yeah, I mean, the assumption that you can, all right, it's Wednesday, August 7th, make sure my source gets back to me. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So I'll just leave it at that.
I get it. Understood. Let's move on. We're going to get to our first commercial break. Coming back, we'll talk about day 10 of training camp practice. We'll talk about what happened down there at day 10. Think about get into the offense, the defense. Jalen Hurts, he broke the training camp record for those who care about the Elliott Shore Parks stat numbers. So Jalen Hurts did that today on his 26th birthday. Happy birthday to quarterback Jalen Hurts. Let's get to our first commercial break. Thanks, everybody, for being here. A lot of new members today, by the way. Prince says, become a JAKIB member. Remember, we're giving away up to 20 Saquon jerseys this season. Every time he goes over 125 yards. So if you're a channel member, you must be a channel member to win. If you're a channel member, you'll be eligible to win a Saquon jersey. So consider joining today and supporting the channel. Thank you. We appreciate that. Let's get to our commercial break. On the other side, we'll talk about day 10 of training camp. Back in a minute.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.